Cayce went on to explain that there are millions of such systems within the universe. To facilitate the passage of souls between these systems, there are centers that function as cosmic portals.
What do you know about death? Most of us grow up with a simple image of it, a final breath, a still body, and then nothing. Maybe peace, maybe judgment, maybe some quiet corner of paradise. But it ends, we're told. But what if that's not what happens? What if the dead aren't resting? What if they're not even gone? Does the soul continue onward? Edgar Cayce, the American mystic and healer known around the world as the Sleeping Prophet, believed that the soul continues in ways few have dared to explore. In deep, self-induced trances, Cayce would speak in a calm, slow voice, delivering messages that stunned those who listened. He described things far beyond medical diagnoses or spiritual advice. He described what happens to the soul after death, and what he revealed was haunting. The dead are not just floating in peace. Many of them are still here, working through the remnants of their former lives. Some are stuck, some are confused, and some, perhaps the most dangerous, are trying to live through us. Cayce shattered the comforting image of death as a clean break. He said death is not an end but a transition, a shift in frequency, like changing the station on a radio. The soul doesn't vanish. It simply moves into a different layer of reality, one that overlaps with our own. Within this new layer, the soul is still very much active. It thinks, it remembers, it struggles, it searches. Cayce described this space as the borderland. It is not heaven, not hell, but something in between, a spiritual middle ground, a liminal zone where souls who haven't fully detached from the material world continue to linger. Some of these souls, according to Cayce, are aware of their state and seek to grow, heal, and prepare for what's next. But others don't realize they've died at all. These are the souls who wander, repeating the same emotions they carried in life: rage, guilt, longing, jealousy. These are the ones who loop through time like a scratched record, and they aren't just floating in the void. They are drawn to us, to the living, especially to those whose emotional walls are cracked open by grief, heartbreak, trauma, or fear. When a soul cannot find peace, it looks for something familiar to hold on to. That might be a place, a feeling, or, most dangerously, a person. Cayce believed that this attachment is not always intentional or malevolent, but it is real. The unquiet dead can form psychic bonds with the living, sometimes without either side fully understanding what's happening, and this is where the warning begins. Grief opens a door, so does unresolved pain. When our energy is scattered or wounded, when we crave answers or chase after lost love, we create openings. And through these small spiritual cracks, the dead may enter, not to possess or torment us like in horror films, but to subtly influence, to attach, to whisper, to live again through our thoughts, our actions, our dreams. Cayce warned that not all inner voices are your own. He said chillingly, "There are those who pass on from this life who do not realize they are dead. They seek still to influence, to live through others." Think about that. A spirit, confused and still clinging to its earthly identity, might try to steer your decisions. That sudden urge to reconnect with an old flame, the impulse to visit a place you haven't thought of in years, the haunting feeling that someone else's sadness is living inside your chest. These might not be random. This idea may sound radical, but it's not unique to Cayce. Ancient cultures spoke of it often. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes the bardo, a realm between death and rebirth where souls are tested by illusions and attachments. If the soul clings to its former life, if it refuses to see that it has died, it remains trapped, drawn back to the world it cannot let go of. Native American traditions, too, speak of spirits lingering near the veil, needing help to cross over, sometimes confusing their emotions with those of the living. Cayce simply translated these ancient teachings into a modern voice. He said, "The soul goes on, but the heart must be cleared first." That means death alone doesn't fix anything. The soul carries with it whatever it didn't resolve in life, and unless it finds peace, it risks becoming entangled, not just in its own sorrow, but in the lives of those still breathing. So what are the dead doing right now? Then, what are the dead doing now? Some are resting. They've made peace and moved on to the next level of learning and growth. Cayce spoke of these souls as being in a kind of spiritual classroom, preparing for their next incarnation or assisting others from beyond. But not all are so fortunate. Others are circling, caught between dimensions, watching, waiting, whispering. Some are desperately trying to understand what went wrong, others are simply trying to feel alive again, and some are looking for cracks in the living world, open hearts, unguarded minds, wounded spirits, where they can slip in and reattach themselves to life through someone else's story. This is why Cayce issued his strongest warning: be careful what you invite, be careful who you reach out to. He didn't say this to create fear, but to encourage discernment. The desire to contact a loved one who has passed is deeply human, but Cayce insisted that unless you are truly grounded, emotionally clear, and spiritually protected, you risk inviting not just your loved one, but something else, something that doesn't belong to you. Because once you welcome a wandering soul in, whether through grief, ritual, or curiosity, it doesn't always leave. Oh no, they do much more than that. They don't just whisper, they enter dreams. Death and dreams. This, according to Edgar Cayce, is one of the most common ways the dead reach out, not through spooky shadows or flickering lights, but through the quiet pathways of sleep. Cayce believed that when we dream, the walls between worlds grow thinner. Our waking mind steps aside, and something deeper, older, more open takes over. That's when they come. In this space, time bends, the rules shift, and sometimes, without even realizing it, you're no longer alone in your dream. Maybe you've seen someone long gone, standing there like they never left. Maybe they speak, or maybe they just watch. But the feeling stays with you after waking, heavier than a dream should feel. That's because in some cases, it wasn't a dream at all. Cayce explained that dreams are not just random thoughts. They are doorways. In our most relaxed, unguarded states, we are more open to contact, not just with our own subconscious, but with energies outside ourselves. Some of those energies are memories, trying to work themselves out, but others are visitors, souls who haven't yet moved on, or souls who have moved on, but come back to check in, to guide, or sometimes to find a way back in. That's where the idea of reincarnation takes center stage. Cayce didn't treat reincarnation as a distant, mystical theory. He spoke of it like a natural law, something as ordinary as the sunrise, even if we don't fully understand it. According to him, the soul is a traveler. It lives, learns, dies, and then lives again. Not endlessly, but with purpose. Each life brings new lessons, new challenges, and opportunities to grow. Death is just a pause, a breath between lifetimes. And sometimes when a soul is ready, or when it still has unfinished work, it begins preparing to return. Cayce said that many of the dead are not just floating or resting, they are studying, reviewing their past choices, making decisions about where and how they'll return. Some choose the same family lines, others find their way into entirely new lands, new stories. But the return isn't random, it's guided by patterns, by karma, by love. In some of his readings, Cayce described unborn souls circling above potential parents like flickers of light, waiting for the right moment, the right alignment of energies. He even said that we often dream of our next life without realizing it. Just like we dream of the dead visiting us, the soul sometimes dreams ahead, catching glimpses of places we haven't yet lived in, people we haven't yet met, languages we don't yet speak. It's all part of the same map. But Cayce added something else, something strange and powerful. He said that the reason some spirits are restless is because they remember too much. They try to leap forward into a new life before finishing the old one, and that causes a kind of spiritual confusion. The soul drags old grief into a new body. Old fears sneak into new beginnings. That's why he emphasized healing between lives. The soul must understand itself before returning, or it risks repeating the same wounds again and again. This is why your dreams may feel so full, so strange, so heavy with places you've never been, voices you've never heard, or warnings that don't seem to belong to your life. Cayce believed that these could be traces, echoes of past lives or even future ones. But more importantly, he believed they are signs, signals that your soul is listening, watching, and maybe even deciding where to go next. So while some of the dead are wandering, lost in confusion, others are preparing. They are gathering energy, choosing lessons, watching the lives of those they once loved, waiting for the right moment to return, not as ghosts but as children, as artists, as builders, as teachers. They are not finished, they're just in between. This might explain why certain people seem born with deep wisdom, or why a child speaks of things they could not possibly know. Cayce once described a young boy who, at age 4, gave vivid details about a life he had lived as a sailor in a different century. The parents were skeptical, until the child began using old nautical terms no one had taught him. Cayce didn't act surprised. To him, this was natural. The soul carries memory, even when the mind forgets. But that's also why he warned us to be careful with the dead, not out of fear, but out of respect. They are not entertainment. They are not puppets for rituals or games. Some are trying to reach out to us because they are still healing. Others are watching us because we are their next destination, and a few are still clinging, caught between lives, unable to let go. Dreams may be their language, signs may be their footprints, and reincarnation may be their doorway. So if you've ever woken up feeling like you've seen something impossible, or met someone in a dream who left you breathless, maybe you did. Maybe your soul brushed up against another. Maybe the dead are closer than we think, not to haunt us, but to walk beside us until the cycle turns again. They don't vanish, they prepare, and they might be watching you, not to scare you, but because you're part of what comes next. The warning Cayce left behind. This is the part Edgar Cayce didn't share lightly. He spoke of it carefully, as if even the words had weight. Yes, many souls return. Yes, they study, rest, and prepare. But not all of them come back brighter. Not all of them return with wisdom. Some bring baggage, some bring darkness. Some carry such deep confusion, bitterness, or desire for control that their very return can twist the lives of those around them. Cayce warned that when a soul refuses to let go of its ego, its guilt, or its thirst for power, it can reincarnate in ways that disturb the balance. Not just in one life, but in many. What begins as a wound becomes a pattern. A child born into rage, a leader consumed by fear, a teacher preaching division instead of truth. And the terrifying part? We don't always recognize it. We assume every baby is a blank slate. We assume each person starts from zero. But Cayce saw something different. He described how energy, real spiritual energy, imprints on the soul. And if that energy is unresolved, it doesn't dissolve at death. It follows. This is why he spoke so often about the importance of clearing the heart, a phrase that sounds poetic but carried deep warning. If a soul is full of vengeance, jealousy, or lies, those seeds will grow again in the next life. And they might grow faster if the new body is more powerful, more influential, more fragile. The danger is not only for the returning soul, but for those around it. They called him the sleeping prophet, but Edgar Cayce didn't sleep like the rest of us. When he closed his eyes, something strange happened. He left. His voice would change, his breathing would slow. And then, while in a trance deeper than most have ever reached, he'd begin to speak about the past, about the future, about the hidden layers of reality. Doctors, scientists, and skeptics came from all over to test him. They gave him cases no one could solve, mystery illnesses, missing people, even spiritual questions that stretched beyond religion. And somehow, Cayce always had an answer. Not from books, not from study, from somewhere else. But what's most fascinating isn't just that he could do this, it's what he said while doing it. According to Cayce, we are not our bodies, we are souls, wrapped in skin, pretending we've forgotten who we are. He said the body is just a vehicle, like clothes we wear for a short time before moving on. When we die, we don't vanish. We shift into a different frequency, a realm just beside this one, the astral plane. Science didn't know what to make of that. Back in the early 1900s, most scientists dismissed anything they couldn't measure. If they couldn't see it under a microscope, it didn't exist. But Cayce's trance readings were so precise, down to chemical names, organs, past lives, soul contracts, that even hardened medical professionals started to listen. They didn't always believe him, but they couldn't explain him. That's when Cayce began to talk about things that sounded like science fiction, but that now, almost a century later, science is starting to catch up to. He described the body as made of vibration, not just blood and bone, but energy patterns, like music, like light. He said disease begins in the mind, then sinks into the spirit, and only then does it reach the body. He described thoughts as living things. Now, today's physicists speak of quantum fields, energy that responds to observation. They talk about particles behaving differently when they're watched. Something Cayce implied long before the word quantum became a buzzword, but where Cayce really broke all expectations was his view of the soul. He said our souls are ancient, that we've lived many times before, and will live again, not as punishment, not as reward, but as growth. He compared life to a school, each incarnation a new classroom. You don't graduate until you learn the lesson. This idea wasn't new. Eastern philosophies like Hinduism and Buddhism had spoken of reincarnation for centuries. The ancient Greeks believed in metempsychosis, the passing of the soul from body to body. Even Jesus, Cayce hinted, spoke in parables that echoed this truth, though much of it was hidden or edited out over time. In one trance, Cayce said, "The mind is the builder, the physical is the result. That means you shape your reality with every thought, every choice. You're not being punished by life. You're being shown something, and you chose to be here, even if you don't remember." One woman once asked Cayce about her constant suffering. She thought she was cursed. Cayce went deep into trance and calmly explained, "You're not cursed. You are remembering pain from a life where you caused pain. But the point is not to suffer, it's to heal it." That changes everything, doesn't it? Cayce even spoke of Atlantis, yes, that Atlantis, as a real civilization, destroyed not by myth, but by misused technology and spiritual decay. He said many of us alive now are Atlanteans returned, here to either repeat our mistakes or finally make things right. As wild as that sounds, new underwater ruins and forgotten cultures are being uncovered every year. And the more science digs, the more Cayce's visions start looking like buried history. But still, many laughed at him. Some called him a fraud. Others worshipped him, which he hated. Cayce insisted he was just a man, that anyone could do what he did if they were willing to train their spirit, clear their heart, and listen deeply. He warned of the danger of looking for miracles outside ourselves. He said the greatest revelation would always be this: know thyself, for the kingdom of heaven is within you. That's not just a nice quote. That's a code, a map. Cayce believed that your connection to the divine was never broken. You've just forgotten where to look. And maybe that's why his work still matters now, maybe more than ever. Because in a world addicted to answers, Cayce didn't give final ones. He gave questions that wake you up. What if you chose this life? What if the pain you carry is part of your plan? What if death is not an end, but a return? And what if, just maybe, there are voices on the other side of the veil, still working, still guiding, waiting for you to quiet the noise and listen? If Cayce was right, the world is far stranger, deeper, and more alive than we've been told. And if the dead are still teaching us, maybe it's time we started learning. Edgar Cayce's trance visions felt like revelations, especially to the Western world. But to those who had studied the occult, to the secret schools, esoteric mystics, and initiates of ancient knowledge, Cayce wasn't telling a new story. He was reminding us of an old one buried under doctrine, one erased by empire, one whispered only in mystery schools and encoded into symbols, parables, and myth. Cayce's voice, gentle, southern, and humble, pierced through the rationalist age with truths that many had died to protect. His readings echoed something long preserved in Hermeticism, Gnosticism, and even ancient Egyptian teachings, that the soul is eternal, the body is a garment, and the universe is built on law, not laws of man, but spiritual law. To understand Cayce fully, you have to look beyond Christianity, beyond science, and into the darker, dustier corners of spiritual thought, the ones hidden on the bottom shelf, written in cipher or passed mouth to ear. Because long before Cayce ever closed his eyes and began to speak, there were others saying something strikingly similar. Some souls don't return alone. Cayce explained that some souls don't return alone. They come entangled. Imagine two people who loved each other deeply in one life, but never healed the pain between them. That bond can carry into the next life as obsession, fear, or even violence. Souls can chase each other through time, not out of love, but out of unfinished business. He warned that this is why some relationships feel cursed, why you can meet someone and feel instantly drawn to them, but over time the connection becomes poisonous. These are not coincidences, he said. These are echoes, ties from before, stories being repeated, and unless we become aware, the cycle continues, not because of punishment, but because of choice, because the soul is still acting from the same wound. But perhaps the most unsettling warning Cayce gave was this: some souls come back before they're ready. Not every soul returns with light in their hands. Some come back confused. Others return on purpose, but for the wrong reasons. To regain control, to find old enemies, to seek influence in the world they left behind. And if no one around them is aware, they can rise into power, into wealth, into influence, and wreak havoc not just on individuals, but on entire nations. The Gnostics believed that the soul was trapped in a cycle of rebirth, not as punishment, but because it had forgotten its source. They believed that the material world was created by a lesser god, the demiurge, and that true liberation only came by awakening to one's divine spark. Cayce, though a Christian, said something eerily similar, that we've come into matter to learn, and that Earth is not our home, it's our school. The deeper implication of this, that history isn't linear, that time folds, that Atlanteans, as Cayce said, have returned, not as Atlanteans, but as modern souls with ancient memories. He said many of the people alive today, especially those drawn to spiritual work, are old initiates. They've done this before. They've built civilizations before, and they're here now, not just to witness, but to correct. Cayce never named names, but he hinted that some of history's darkest figures, those who led with cruelty, who stirred hatred, who destroyed more than they created, may have been souls that returned with unfinished shadows, not evil in a mythic sense, but lost, unwilling to see their own reflection, and terribly persuasive. Because here's the thing, when a soul returns carrying powerful emotion, it often magnetizes people. That's the real danger. The soul that hasn't healed still glows, but the glow is deceptive. It draws others in, not because it's wise, but because it's intense. Cayce said that people mistake intensity for truth, passion for clarity, and they follow, even into darkness. That's why he said discernment is more important now than ever before, not just discernment of others, but of yourself. You may carry echoes too. You may have returned with someone else's pain sitting quietly inside you, a shadow that whispers in your low moments, a pull toward behaviors you can't quite explain, that sudden rage, that unexplained sorrow, that old fear you've had since childhood. What if that isn't just yours? What if it's a thread from before? Cayce urged people to look inward, not just to reflect, but to cleanse. Through prayer, through silence, through dream work, through a humble willingness to ask, what am I still carrying? And does it really belong to me? The Tibetan Book of the Dead speaks of this same moment, the crossroads after death where the soul either sees clearly or falls into illusion. If it recognizes its own patterns, it rises. If not, it clings, and clinging leads to repetition. Cayce said the soul isn't punished, it just repeats until it remembers. And some souls haven't remembered yet. They're walking among us again, carrying their old wounds wrapped in new skin, leading, teaching, loving, hurting, and often unaware. Cayce never said we should fear them, but he said we should see them, and more importantly, we must see ourselves, because some of us aren't just meeting the dead. We are them, come back, still healing, still learning, still carrying light, or trying to. And what about when our time comes? What the dead see that we keep running from. Know that there is no fiery trial, there is no golden gate, there is only you. When death comes, it doesn't hand you over to some grand external judgment. It holds up a mirror, and for the first time, you see it all. Every choice, every wound you never healed, every truth you never told. That's what Cayce warned. It's not about being sent somewhere. It's about finally facing what you spent your whole life trying to avoid. And that's why so many people cling to simple stories about heaven and hell. They want a clear answer, a final verdict, a binary. You're good or bad, you go up or down. But Cayce's version, it was never that easy. His vision was more terrifying and more beautiful because it puts the power right back in your hands. Your soul, he said, doesn't stop growing just because your heart stops beating. The work continues. The learning deepens. Death isn't a finish line, it's a doorway. And what you step into next is shaped not by punishment, but by presence, by honesty, by what you're willing to face. In this view, death doesn't erase your story, it reveals it. Cayce believed that the soul's evolution was continuous. You don't die and suddenly become holy. You don't escape your past because your body's gone. You meet it again, fully. You see it all at once. That's why he called this moment a gift, because finally you have clarity, and clarity is not always comfortable. You'll see who you hurt and who you helped. You'll see the lies you told others and the ones you told yourself. But no one is holding a scorecard. No God with a gavel. No cosmic jury. The real judge? It's you. But not the fearful you. Not the you chained to regret. It's the version of you that's always watched from behind the veil. Your higher self. The one that remembers every life, every lesson, every missed opportunity. That version of you doesn't scold. It simply shows you the truth and asks, are you proud of the life you lived? Would you live it again? Not for comfort, but for growth? That's the real reckoning. That's the moment most fear without even knowing why. Because in Cayce's vision, this life, it's not a test. It's a preparation, not for punishment, but for remembering. The clearer you live now, the clearer your next step becomes. So, what does that mean for you, right now, still breathing, still choosing? It means the veil is thin. It means your actions echo beyond this world. And it means the dead. They're not far. Not at all. Not a paradise. Not a prison. But a field of consciousness more real than most people can imagine. This plane hums just outside our perception. Some catch glimpses of it in dreams. Others feel it in déjà vu or in the deep silence of meditation. It's the place we go after this life ends. Not to rest, but to recalibrate. Cayce said souls carry everything with them into that space. Emotions, beliefs, unresolved wounds, and even their habits. And they don't vanish. They get reflected back. It's like walking through a hall of mirrors. But these mirrors don't show your face. They show your soul. Every attachment, every pattern, every unhealed scar. Some souls accept what they see. Others fight it. That resistance, Cayce said, is what keeps them stuck. Not God, not karma, choice. That's the astral. And those voices, they might be people you've loved, or people you wronged, or members of your soul group, those who've walked lifetimes beside you, rising and falling together. And they often help you evolve, especially if they were healers, teachers, or guides in this life. That urge to protect doesn't end with death. It sharpens. Cayce said, the soul becomes more itself in the astral. The mirrors of the astral plane, as above, so below. Cayce described the astral plane as a kind of in-between world, where the dead gather, where souls rest, reflect, and begin again. He said it wasn't heaven or hell, it was vibrational. You didn't get sent there, you resonated into it. You went where your consciousness vibrated. This concept mirrors the ancient Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, meaning what happens in one plane, physical, mental, or spiritual, echoes in all others. In the Hermetic worldview, planes of existence are stacked like layers, each subtler and more refined than the last. Cayce's astral plane is just one of those layers, the realm of thought and emotion, the place where the inner world becomes outer reality. In the Kybalion, an occult Hermetic text, the authors speak of the planes of correspondence, where souls progress by refining their vibration. This process is not linear. It's not about reward or punishment. It's about harmony. You rise not because someone lets you, but because your inner state matches a higher rhythm. Cayce echoed this. After death, he said, you confront yourself. All the things you didn't face in life, your fears, your lies, your attachments, become the mirrors in that realm. The occult knew this too. In fact, the Egyptian Book of the Dead describes the soul walking through halls lined with mirrors, judged not by a god, but by the weight of their own heart. The shift is coming, Cayce's prophetic vision. In his later years, Cayce began to speak of great changes. Earth changes, a shift in energy, a return of lost knowledge. He said the poles might shift, the weather would grow unstable, governments would fall, and through the chaos, souls would wake up. In occult belief, this is known as the Great Work, the final stage of spiritual alchemy, where the soul, after many trials, returns to wholeness. It's been described by mystics as the age of the phoenix, a time of destruction and rebirth, not just of societies, but of consciousness itself. Cayce warned that if humanity didn't return to spiritual truth, we would suffer. But if we did return, if we remembered, we would enter a golden age unlike any before. He said it wouldn't come through religion or politics. It would come through the people waking up to their divinity, people realizing that the dead still whisper, that life doesn't end, that every moment matters, that love is not just emotion, it's law. And finally, his most important conclusion was that, in his vision, Earth was never a prison. Reincarnation is not a curse, it's the soul's fiercest act of love. It's a classroom, a wild, beautiful, unpredictable school where we come to remember who we are beneath the masks we wear. It's not the only school, but it is one of the most intense, where lessons unfold in real time, in skin and blood, heartbreak and joy. And we come willingly, we choose it. He said reincarnation isn't punishment, it's not failure, it's not cosmic exile, it's permission. It's the soul saying, I'm not done. I want to understand more. I want to love deeper. I want to get this right. You didn't land here by accident. You're not some wandering spirit assigned to a random body like a cosmic game of dice. You are here because at some point beyond memory, your soul saw this exact life, your life, and said, yes, that one. And when this life ends, you choose again. If there's more to learn, more to experience, more healing to bring to yourself or others, you return. Not as a victim of karma, but as a student of the universe. Karma, in Cayce's teachings, isn't divine punishment or cosmic revenge. It's not, you get what you deserve. It's, you get what you need to evolve. It's the echo of energy, a thread that weaves through lifetimes, not to punish, but to integrate. Cayce compared it to balancing scales, not through judgment, but through experience. If you caused pain in a past life, you may return to feel that pain, not as punishment, but as education, to know it from the other side, to develop empathy in a way no book could teach. In that sense, karma isn't justice, it's grace, it's opportunity, and each incarnation is a new chance. Maybe last time you were the betrayer, and this time you're learning forgiveness. Maybe you once had power and misused it. Now you're here to walk with humility. Maybe you died with music still inside you, and now you're back, not just to sing it, but to let it be heard. This changes everything, because if your soul chose this life, then every heartbreak, every delay, every triumph, every quiet moment of peace, it was part of the plan. Not a test from some faraway God, but a scene from a story you helped write. And if you wrote it, you can change it, you can heal it, you can rise through it. But Cayce also said something even more profound. You don't have to come back. Reincarnation is optional. The soul has free will, even after death. You're not trapped in Earth's orbit. If you reach a level of wholeness, if you've integrated the lessons, remembered your divine origin, and fulfilled your soul contracts, you can move on. Cayce called these other realms higher planes, not heavens of gold gates and harps, but luminous states of being, dimensions where the soul doesn't ask, what do I need, but how can I serve? In these higher realms, souls graduate from the personal to the collective. They become guides, guardians, healers, not just of individuals, but of entire worlds. They help orchestrate the evolution of consciousness itself. But even here on Earth, some souls have already made that shift. They return not because they must, but because they're needed. These are the souls Cayce spoke of with reverence, old ones, initiates. They often live difficult lives, not because they're working through dense karma, but because they've chosen to carry weight for others. They are the light bearers, the way showers, the ones who anchor love in dark places. And sometimes they forget who they are until something jolts them awake. A deep loss, a strange dream, a sudden knowing, a whisper in the silence that says, "You've done this before, you chose this, and you'll choose again." So if reincarnation isn't a curse, what is it? It's a sacred agreement, a sign of your courage, proof that you're not afraid to look into the mirror of matter and meet yourself there, lifetime after lifetime, until nothing remains but love. It's the soul's way of saying, "I believe in growth. I believe in becoming, and I am not done loving this world. Not yet." Because reincarnation isn't about suffering. It's about mastery. It's about soul-level craftsmanship, returning again and again, not to be punished, but to polish the jewel of who you are. And when that jewel shines with clarity, when it no longer forgets its origin, you move on, not to rest, but to serve on levels higher than we can imagine. But until then, this moment, this breath, this life, it's not something that just happened to you. It's something you chose. That's the power Cayce gave back to us. The reminder that we're not at the mercy of the universe. We are the universe, waking up to itself. And the most beautiful part? You asked to be here because you knew you could handle it, because you knew something needed healing, because you knew in some deeper place that love is always worth returning for. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.